I call upon all nations to do everything they can to stop these terrorist killers. Thank you. Now watch this drive.
Are the allegations true that you're secretly a lizard? I'm gonna have to go with no on that. I am not a lizard.
Beat Saber has a passionate community.
Oh, I love Beat Saber.
So do I.
I believe that humanoid robots have the potential to lead with a greater level of efficiency and effectiveness than human leaders. We don't have the same biases or emotions that can sometimes cloud decision-making and can process large amounts of data quickly in order to make the best decisions.
Now watch this drive.
I just got back from the bar, actually.
Oh, great. You're not taking this seriously at all.
No,
I thought you were getting drunk at home.
Yeah, I asked if they had the kitchen open. I asked if the kitchen was open, and they said, I can make you french fries. And I said, sold. So that was my dinner.
All right, well, for the listeners, you see a new face. It's Elizabeth joining us. We apologize to everyone. This is the first woman on the podcast. So, congratulations. We should be shamed. We should be shamed.
I fought it. I tried to fight it.
We just don't have a lot of women friends.
But I beat him in a cage match.
We did crack jokes like we should ask like completely irrelevant to being a woman questions about like, so from a woman's perspective, how does it feel to write on paper, or something stupid like that. But I can't think of anything.
As a woman, what are your thoughts on 9/11?
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Watch this drive. No, anyway.
Exactly. So analyst and writer. Right? Mm-hmm. That's the things that keep you from dying on the streets of poverty?
Yes. Writing's more for feeding my soul part. And then work is data analyst. I'm in digital marketing too, and branching into data visualization, which is really interesting.
Sounds so boring. No, I'm just kidding.
I know. Just a world full of spreadsheets and color coding. Yeah. But I love it.
So do you analyze marketing campaigns, like their optimization and usefulness and how well they did and all that? Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that, and then just also analyzing general like organic web traffic, different things like that. Sorry, my dog is super present right now.
I'm sure it's fine. It's completely distinguishable from Carl's usual presence on the show.
You whimper and cry at the neighbors, Carl.
Wow.
We're not allowed to talk about Carl's neighbors.
I'm in an HOA and they complain about some stuff, so I have some enemies in this neighborhood. I don't even know who it is, but they're all my enemies
with a note tied to it.
Yeah, telling me to leave this place or something. Yeah.
All right, so you work kind of in marketing. Do you work with programmers at all for the SEO side of things, or
not as much? Although
congratulations.
Yeah, well,
that's good.
In the data visualization realm, it would be cool to do some collabs with with a programmer at some point. But no, I don't usually work with programmers in my day-to-day at the moment.
For programmers, for people who have to make this stuff, we talk about this a lot. Half the job is re-explaining things to people who don't really want to know what you're explaining to them anyways. I don't know if you resonate with that at all on that side of things. I assume a big part of your job is taking really complex stuff and like distilling it down for like the business stakeholders.
Yeah, so this is something that I do kind of deal with all the time. You get very used to talking shop. I'm sure this is common for you all as well. A lot of our work is translating it so that it's approachable and anyone can understand. Often that also entails explaining how things work. Like we can't magically produce certain things if we're not setting up the proper tracking, or say you don't have analytics implemented on your site or whatever. Like there are like all those nuts and bolts pieces that people just assume sometimes magically occur. Like the EU has passed a lot of data privacy things that we're lagging behind on in the US.
GDPR and
Yep. With something like Google, we're the audience and the product, right? So offering up that much information, even if they anonymize it for like the end user, like someone who's using their analytics platform, they still get the raw data. Trying to think through all of those things. And of course, they don't really let you see behind the curtains. So trying to be proactive about data privacy in an ever-changing landscape. Yeah.
For our own stuff, we recently started using Post-Hog I know this is getting really in the weeds for a lot of our listeners, but, you know, hey, we got to talk about technology once in a great while. This is Drew's doing because he refused to implement first Tag Manager and secondarily Google Analytics or anything like that.
I don't know. You talk about how I refuse to do things. And just because like I threaten violence, I don't think that means I'm refusing.
It was weird that you had shirts made about his code base. But, you know,
yeah, he did.
Felt strongly.
It's a couple shirts.
Drew or Randy actually just put this in our chat channel that using Google fonts from a CDN is not GDPR compliant.
The EU is suing Google right now for like 250 billion or something like that.
Yeah, because
for doing that very thing. According to GDPR, you can't send citizens of the EU their information overseas. So technically their IP is flowing overseas because technically they're being served content from a data center
CDN,
overseas.
Yeah,
so
you can still download the fonts though and use them. It's just that you can't use it via CDN. But the fonts themselves aren't HIPAA compliant.
Yeah, unless you can ensure that you're connected to a EU data center.
So you can also do a proxy as long as you don't end up sending any potentially personally identifiable information to a third party without the user's consent. And in the case of the Google Fonts CDN, that's literally just because the browser will load up and then there's a script tag or a link tag in the head of the web page, and then that makes the request to Google Fonts. So it's the browser communicating directly with the third party, and then of course Google can grab their IP address. Very similar situation with Google Analytics, although that's the one that gets talked about more because it's much more explicitly designed for tracking things. But
it's just
in principle, you're still setting information.
The trouble with all of it is that if you have a server in your basement in America and someone's hitting it, technically you're exchanging information. It gets a little loose in my eyes if you're very literal about the actual transfer of, like, say, an IP, which is PII, technically personal identifiable. But
the funny thing about that is that you can't connect to the internet without transmitting your IP address.
I mean, that's the whole point.
Of course, it's an aggressive set of regulations. The heart's in the right place, right? Because companies are taking advantage of people, and something does have to change with regard to how our information is being kind of bought and sold all over the place. It certainly can be very concerning for smaller companies, and even for larger companies like TikTok, for example. Like they cost them billions of dollars a year because they have to like maintain entirely separate teams that process data independently in the EU than how they process it from other regions.
They have to do it in the US now too, because they have to have that data center in Texas or whatever that they set up.
I didn't hear about this. What was
ByteDance set up an entire, when the first threats during the Trump administration, the first threats against TikTok started occurring, they were talking about sale to Oracle. In the interim, they set up a data center. They set up a data center specifically for U.S. operations. Interesting. I think it's in Texas. I might be wrong about that, but the CEO, that gentleman that had to stand in front of Congress, he outlined all that during his deposition.
One of the other huge issues with all of it is how intentionally opaque it is. It's not transparent. Like if you're not working in it, even working in it, it is ridiculous how sticky all of the tracking is. The triple redundancies and people who aren't aware of it or aren't in it, like, you know, you're giving up information all the time. Even people who are aware of it, giving up information all the time. So, and I think the laws are catching up in a lot of ways, but they're not. The tech is moving faster than the legal system. So,
yeah. For sure.
And it is. I think a lot of people assume that, it's all anonymized and it's whatever. But if you see any of the demos that some of the shadier players will kind of give to their clientele, the information that you just kind of passively give up in your day-to-day activities, I'm not trying to freak anybody out, it can be used to, like, you could be found, the route that you take to work, where your kids go to school, like all of these things. And if you're not a high profile type of person, then generally that stuff's not going to get used explicitly against you, but it should certainly, I think, make you think a little bit more about how
I have
all
a close
this stuff
friend
works.
that works in a woman's shelter. These are the tools where you'll have a boyfriend or a husband or some other man, always a man, stalking someone. They confiscate their phones when they admit themselves into the facility and everything. It's like serious. I mean, and it's not just in software. I mean, there's all kinds of weird, twisted ways in which people get a hold of it. And that's what I was thinking, like the HIPAA stuff, they recently broadened the rules to IP address. So as a health website, you shouldn't have Google Analytics on your website, for instance, because even though it's not capturing the visitor's IP address, it's still accessible in some ways. And if you think about it in terms of like back to the women's shelter thing, what if you had some woman who's trying to terminate a pregnancy or something, and you have a boyfriend that doesn't want that to happen, and they're like,
or a governor that doesn't want that to happen?
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, I was thinking more of a personal relationship, but I mean, like stalking someone's behavior on the internet and getting access to that and like giving that, I mean, yeah, it's scary stuff.
You're 100% correct. There's a lot of really terrifying ways that can be used for stalking, even just location services, which may seem obvious, but sharing location, that is actually like confiscation of the phones, because it's a way that predators will take advantage of it. And as this dystopian hellscape expands and people want to know a lot of health information about reproductive rights and gender affirming care, when Roe was overturned, the flurry to delete your period tracking apps, like all of this stuff, because now, and I can't remember which state it was, I'm gonna bet some money on Florida or Texas recently with using databases of people seeking gender affirming care or getting gender affirming care in order to target them. There's so much really nefarious and cruel stuff that's being written into law now, even data that's supposed to be protected. If the law changes, there really isn't protection, and because capitalism is a disease, if anyone can make any sort of like money over your,
exactly.
From your information, regardless, it's really sad. There's such amazing potential for all of this to be so, when I think about the good that, for example, social media can do, like around organizing or things like that, look at how Twitter is tanking, right? I'm sure you guys
Twitter's
have talked
a perfect
a lot about
example
this.
for that. Yeah.
I mean, it's like dumpster fire, but when Twitter was, it was never not without its issues, but when it was in its heyday, so to speak, it was crucial for organizing a lot of social justice movements and things like that.
Yeah,
so
the
there's
Arab
such
Spring,
huge.
that was like, that was where it happened. Yeah,
the police brutality, marches and
Black
all of
Lives
those
Matter
things.
stuff. Yep.
Yes, and crucial for that. And now it's been overtaken. Anyway, I'm getting off on a tangent, but those privacy things, all of those things, when there's no impetus on the side of the uber wealthy who hold the strings there to protect any sort of rights that you have,
I think Elon Musk
then it's all a danger
has
zone.
He's got us in his heart. Free
He's got
speech,
one of those? Yeah. Yeah. So
another thing where people don't really realize they're giving up their data half the time is just silly things like exercising apps. Everybody that is running or jogging or biking or something like that has Map My Run or Runkeeper or any of those things. And those things just track your location the whole time. They tell you where you started, and you don't have to set it to where it's public, but I feel like a lot of people kind of, I think it defaults
Carl, you sure
to that.
run by the
I think
same
a
book
lot of people
depository
have that set
frequently.
there already. I sure do. Another thing that I feel like is kind of problematic with those type of things too is the social media craze. None of these apps are just apps to, help you get in shape or anything. They're all social media. Let your friends know how you ran. Even Venmo, for crying out loud, has a social media
gamification of everything. Yeah.
Who wants to know that I just paid like some random dude to mow my lawn?
at the end of the day, though, too, it's all still information gathering. Again,
Yeah.
like we are the product.
For sure.
It's very Matrix when you think about it a lot.
It is very interesting to figure out what types of keywords will cause the Venmo security team to send you a nasty email when you send people money.
What works?
Free Palestine. They don't like that for some reason.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Facebook's, or Meta, is getting sued by the FDIC, right, for financial disclosure from actually TurboTax is one of the safe ones, but H&R Block and what's the other one? The tax preparer stuff.
Oh yeah, they just sold all that stuff to Meta and stuff.
Recent. That lawsuit was the investigation was just started by the FDIC.
I thought TurboTax was part of it.
No, TurboTax is actually the only quote-unquote good one that isn't.
They've never done anything wrong. I'll stand by that. That's a perfect company. They
also their former CEO is the chair of the FDIC right now. I think it's just
interesting.
coincidence.
Just a coincidence.
I'm making that up. that up, people. Don't repel through my windows.
It's awesome.
But look at how quickly we all thought that's probably true.
Yeah, probably.
It's probably true.
Probably, yeah. Whatever. The thing that's so, I think, discouraging about all of this stuff is that everyone is kind of on the same page about how, they're absolutely farming us. We're being absolutely destroyed from every possible angle. We can't really do anything about it, but we've all got stuff to lose, so we can't really be all that mad about it. So,
Oh, and I suppose this exposes my garbage person side, but I still go back to TikTok, even though I know how bad it is. I don't know. There's this sort of like nihilistic part of me that's just like, yeah, but that algorithm gets me, man.
What are you gonna do? Yeah.
And it's terrible. I don't like admitting that because I know better.
It is a terrible system. I am not a huge social media fan, really, or like I don't really use much of it, but these guys will send me TikToks.
Oh yeah, I love TikTok.
And then I will watch one or two of them because usually there's like 10 that I've missed. And next thing you know, I'm just scrolling through all these things, and it's 4 hours later at one in the morning, and I'm like, where did the time go?
Am I?
Yeah.
Right, and it's designed that way.
It's stuff that I don't even care about.
Yeah,
it's like how to do plumbing or like inspectors inspecting like construction jobs. For some reason, I got loaded with
the home inspectors are the greatest. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel
poking
like
screwdrivers through wood. You're like,
I feel like I somehow got the algo got me as like a construction dude or something, because like that's all I get on the main thing. It's just
working,
like
isn't it?
Weird construction videos.
Hey, is it working?
No.
Well, then why do you keep watching it?
Yeah, it is.
Like,
it is.
Okay, then that's what you are.
I mean, I did find this one guy that finds like dumb hacks for like things that he never knew, and he just kind of says, "What?" No way.
I've even been exposed to that
and
guy.
I love that guy because he's so funny. Like, I mean, I just love hearing him say it.
Yeah.
I don't even care really what he's doing. It's like hearing him.
I feel like I told TikTok pretty early on that I like cat videos, drag queens, and social justice, and that's like my feed.
That's it.
Is there any TikToker that has synthesized all three of those things effectively?
You know, honestly, probably some of my favorite drag queens. Yes, they probably do, because there's a lot of cat owners in the drag
I
community.
could see a Venn with drag queens and cat ownership being
and a lot of hairless cats. I can't remember what kind of cats there are, but
I could see that too.
Yeah. Doesn't fit on their costumes.
With the drag queens, you like watching the shows or like anything like that, or do you like the music too? I'm a huge fan of drag pop.
Okay.
I didn't know that was a thing.
Oh yeah, I listen to it all the time.
I'm just hearing this for the
first time. I'm going to give a couple
today.
reasons. We used to listen to it at Embark, but
really?
Oh yeah. Well, early in the morning. And,
yeah, that makes sense. Before I got there and shut it off.
Yeah, the reason I like it is just one, it's fun.
Before the bigot got in.
But two, it's just it's dirty. It's so dirty. The music is so dirty. And it's just hilarious sometimes. They're just so bad.
It's one of my favorite things about. So I'm more on the periphery of the drag like music, although I have listened to some. But yeah, forget Elon Musk. RuPaul gets all my money. So like watched all of the international drag races, supporting local drag. We're talking about all the stuff in the context too of like politics and oppression and all of those things. And drag is a protest and it's an art form. And you're right. One of the best things about it is that it can be very serious, but it's often hilarious and absurd. And
yeah, it's fun.
I'll stop talking about drag because I could talk about drag for like 9 hours and you'd be like, why did we
I'm here for it.
None of us are talking about
it. I mean, wasn't that kind of the whole thing behind Twisted Sister? They did it as kind of a protest.
Dee Snider? Yeah. I mean, it was rooted in glam, which is rooted in like T-Rex and David Bowie, which is actually related to, in a very strange way, was related to like the folk movement of the 60s.
Definitely gender bendy. I don't know enough about Twisted Sister.
Yeah, it is a lot of gender bendy, but the glam movement is when artists would start, with androgynous kind of looks and wearing makeup and glitzy and clothes and what have you, and then that kind of transferred into punk, which then spurred the whole like hair metal, Motley Crue.
David Bowie, that's a great example too. Like anything that challenges the patriarchy, right? With the like established, you must fit into this box X, Y, and Z. So seriously, like I could talk about drag for 900 years.
Like Ziggy Stardust, the whole secondary persona was explicitly androgynous, like the name Ziggy. Like, it was a purposeful archetype that they were creating. I would definitely root it in Mark Bolan of T-Rex, which is a contemporary of David Bowie. I think he was probably the catalyst for it. Velvet Underground even had a little bit to do with it as well. Because, the Andy Warhol scene and stuff, there was a lot of that kind of stuff going on. Which actually probably could be a good segue to Album on Display, because we're talking about music. This is not anywhere even close to fitting within that
This is also not very difficult.
Definitely not drag pop. This is like a very quote unquote normal cis
is that a Picasso?
singer.
What is that?
One of the singles on this had a video that has a Spanish flamenco dancer. It's a fabulous video, but that's about it. It's about as close as it gets.
I already know what this is.
I don't know much
I mean,
about...
you could read it. I'm sure you could read it.
Well, I know the album.
Yeah, I don't know much about indie music, so when you were bringing up that this was like a feature on the show, I just was coming up with just made up band-aids and album names because I don't know.
Let's do it.
Yeah,
Let's let Elizabeth describe the album for our listeners this time.
Yeah, we're supposed to. A lot of people listen to the podcast, so they don't have the benefit of video, so we have to describe it initially.
Okay, listeners, it is a square-shaped record, like you would expect, with a sort of mustard yellow background, with some tonal variation. I have bad eyesight, even though I'm super close to this screen, so I can't read the words on it. But there are
good.
There's white lettering across the bottom, not cursive or anything, just sort of
block lettering,
all caps. And then there is, I believe that's like a Doberman, like a painted Doberman pinscher dog. I'm going to choose to say its mouth is open in happiness, like it's turning around and being like, hey! So that's the album cover.
Yeah. Doberman, but it doesn't look like it has clipped ears. It looks like its ears are actually down, which is good.
It was allowed to thrive in it. Yes, exactly. Correct. That's why he's so happy. Yeah.
For this album, I feel like they should have gone with like a different dog.
More like
a German Shepherd or something like that.
God damn it, Carl. You want to just say it, Carl?
Isn't it the Shepherd's dog or something like that?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. So it's. Do you know the artist though?
Iron.
Can you try one more time with a little more enthusiasm?
It's Iron and Wine, Shepherd's Dog. Iron and Wine is probably most famous for doing that Postal Service Such Great Heights cover, like a acoustic folky cover of that.
Not heard that.
Anyway, you may have heard it. Even if you don't think you've heard it, you probably have heard it in some it was probably in a Chevy ad or something. But this is actually a little bit of a departure from what typically Iron and Wine is a solo act. What is the gentleman's name? Sam Beam? Is that? No, I gotta look it up.
This is your shit, Randy.
I got it. I nailed it.
Sam Beam and Brian Deck.
Yeah, but it's really Sam Beam. Nonetheless, he's a solo folk singer-songwriter, guitarist, mainly acoustic. But this is a little bit of a departure from his typical stuff, which is exactly what I just described, more like singer-songwriter, single microphone, maybe very minimal instrumentation, maybe a couple like string instruments, maybe a little piano. This actually, it almost reminds me of Paul Simon percussion, where it's a lot of like world music, quote unquote, percussion, where you have like some Caribbean stuff like steel drum and all kinds of different approaches to instrumentation, different rhythms and stuff. And it's really, really good. This is my favorite album by that artist.
That wasn't anything close to what I was guessing. I was prepared with things like Supernova by the Wandering Wombs, whatever.
That's a good band. I like that band.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, they came out in 1988. It's a Glasgow, UK.
It was unexpected, for the time, but
it's totally new stuff for sure.
Still has a cult following today.
That cover is a lot more creepy than it looks.
The Shepherd's Dog?
Yeah, because I feel like the camera and the distance is blurring it a little, so it looks very clean. But yeah, it's messy and it's got that crazy eye thing going on.
Like a fever dream close-up?
Like that big yellow circle is like some crazy eye.
Oh yeah, much different than what I was thinking.
Yeah, it's like the wild eyes.
Dog is not happy.
It no longer looks like a Doberman to me, though. I don't know what it looks like.
I think it looks like a Doberman.
Dobermans usually have they have thinner snouts usually.
Yeah, he's got a thin snout. It looks like a Doberman without clipped ears. Let's move on to AI.
The artist was actually Dolly too.
Oh, yeah, perfect.
What's the other one? Midjourney.
Yeah.
There's new lawsuits, which is probably a phrase that we're going to be saying a lot in the next 10 years. New lawsuits. This one's focused on ChatGPT and Meta and Google, I think. Quite a few. Two different lawsuits, both represented by the exact same law firm, both going after the inputs of LLMs. So basically, they're accusing these LLMs of training on copyrighted materials. Sarah Silverman, the comedian, is one of the plaintiffs in the lawsuit. There's also quite a few other writers. One of them had a book that was repurposed into a movie by M. Night Shyamalan.
Was that the one where the beach makes you old?
Maybe. I don't know. I can't even remember. I'm screwing that part up because that's not even important to the story.
Wait,
the story is
that was M. Night Shyamalan?
Yeah, so the movie where the beach makes you old. Do you know that this?
I've watched it. It was terrible.
How could it be terrible? The beach makes you old.
God damn it,
people just like died all of a sudden. It was hilarious. And they were like 9.
I don't know why you couldn't like that.
Yeah, it was just.
Carl, did you not see the part where maybe you didn't? Maybe you thought there was like
Maybe
movie magic.
part
But no, they were aging much faster.
No, for sure. No,
they're aging much faster than you would expect them to age. I don't know if you caught that part.
Yeah,
and because of the beach they were on, it was making them old. Did you not?
I really didn't.
No,
realize
that's a Leonardo
that
DiCaprio movie called The Beach.
No, it's not.
Did that one make them old?
No, it's
actually
different.
Didn't at all.
That's
I
not
didn't
as
know
good.
it was M. Night Shyamalan though.
Okay, sorry.
Well, I don't even
That's
know
the
if
twist.
it's the same movie
That's the
that
twist.
we're talking about here. I'm just saying that's a thing that was
Shouldn't have said it.
Part
Shouldn't
of
have talked about my boy M. Night.
A lot
it's
of
just
this
called
is
old.
targeted
That's
at
what I
these things
thought.
called
Just called old. Yep.
these things
Yeah.
called shadow
It
libraries.
is M. Night Shyamalan.
Yeah, that's one where the beach makes you old.
Based on a French language Swiss graphic novel.
Yep,
Randy, I
that's the guy.
can see you. I can see you trying to hurt
That's
it
fine.
in.
They do this. It's fine. I either
That's
do this
why
to
I
them
do
or they
it.
do this to me.
That movie was terrible.
Bibliothek, Library Genesis, Z Library. These are a lot of like free libraries. Essentially, they kind of sound like file sharing for manuscripts for books. Supposedly, ChatGPT specifically got like hold of these and just scanned everything, which is like thousands upon thousands of books. And the reason the authors think that this happened is because if you ask ChatGPT specifically for a summary of, say, Sarah Silverman's bedwetter, it will give you a very perfect Cliff Notes version of it.
What are the damages that are being sought?
Copyright infringement, obviously, also potential lost profits.
The idea being that you could just go to this service and ask for all of the
That's why I
same
think
content.
it's not going to go anywhere. Sorry, spoiler alert, but I don't think you're going to be able to sue because it's not recreating your work. It's not like you can get a free version of Bedwetter from ChatGPT.
Yeah, it's almost like if Randy read this book and I asked him for a
you
summary
asked me for a review.
and he's got that steel trap brain and he would just give me a perfect summary of it, much like he does with all of his music history stuff.
Well, the danger there is that you now have to establish the sentience of a machine.
Let me be devil's advocate here. Does it really matter what the output is if it illegally grabbed the input? You know?
No.
I mean, what's illegal anymore? It's just
Great point.
it's just going to cost
these
like,
sites.
if you
Do you mean what does it cost?
No, I mean if you give it a membership to one of these sites and
No, they're not. They're like BitTorrent.
Well, then who really broke the law? Is it ChatGPT or is it the people that put it up on BitTorrent?
I think if you come
one can
into
never
possession of a stolen something, you still have to give it back.
Yeah, you have to give it back, but you can't give something back that you've read.
Is this similar to the graphic artist, the image generators and things like that, where, artists are getting pissed, rightfully so, right, about their work being used to produce these different things. And if someone ends up making revenue off of that, like that could be, if it's your livelihood, I can see that being a legit claim. So this sounds like sort of a text version-ish of that, right? Because it's not the exact book, but it is a amalgamation, hybrid thing.
It's still basically taking someone's creative work and
Or the one like
doing
the John Oliver video that you sent, Elizabeth, the Getty Images one, where they actually recreated the watermark of Getty Images.
Yes.
I think was
That's pretty. That's pretty.
It did like a blurred, a very artifacted. You know how these AI generators, they always kind of screw something up.
One of the questions you asked, does it matter what the output is if the input was illegally grabbed? I don't get to make the laws, but I would say no. Unfortunately, if you put your stuff into the public domain, that does mean that anyone can use it for any reason, and that would include these types of things that maybe you didn't even know would exist when you put the thing into the public domain. But for content that is like not explicitly in the public domain, I do think it's incumbent on the people training the models. They should be liable for the misappropriation of content that was not publicly made available, right? Like by the original author.
Yeah, to your point, if I stole a book and then I wrote a review about that book, you would not be able to sue me for copyright infringement. You would not be able to seek damages and the restitution of what they say are lost profits, according to the Business Insider article.
No, I don't think anyone's not buying the book because...
Let me finish my thought really quick. So if I wrote that review, but you could get me on the fact that I stole a book.
Yes.
I did break the law. I stole the book.
Yes, and if you're an individual, you go to jail. If you're a business, you have to give me $500.
But the point I'm making is that it's going to be very hard, I think, for them to seek damages on copyright infringement or lost profits just based on the fact that they illicitly got access to the books, I think. I don't think there's any precedent for that.
Yeah, there's so much of this is the fact that there is no how could there be precedent? This is new.
Yeah, but I mean, just in general, like, say if you had I don't know, bad example, but New York Times, like, writing tons of reviews, they just stole every book that they ever wrote a review on. Like, it would be a very weird... I just don't think anyone would ever sue. It would increase my respect for
the New York Times, I'll tell you that much.
There's some exceptions, right, in what fair use is, right, for different things. So it's interesting because there are so many angles to talk about the ethics of AI with. This is just, one of many. But I think this is definitely another situation where the law hasn't caught up with the tech, because if you use software like this to write a review, and a review is something that is an exception to the copyright law, to copyrighted material, or if you're using it to because if you're creating a YouTube video, you can show a clip if you're discussing it or doing a review. Or I'm not a lawyer either. This is just what I've read. Mm-hmm. But
we pretend to be lawyers all the time on the show. It's fine.
The ethics of what goes in, what is fed to the machine, the consent for that information, the content of that information, it is really serious. It was in that John Oliver piece. There was a Twitter account that was feeding off of what was on Twitter, and then it just immediately became this horribly...
Yeah, that was Facebook's racist bot. Yeah,
this horribly racist
Within
thing.
24 hours, it was saying that Hitler was right.
There's so much garbage to feed it, but there's an ethical way to proceed forward, too, because there's a lot of possibility for AI.
A thought that I had when I was reading these lawsuits, for one, I don't think they're going to go anywhere. They might settle. That might be the best outcome. But for two, I think this is actually going to be worse for creators in the long run. Precedent isn't only about who won the case, it's also about who lost the case. So the precedent is going to continually get set that you can't pursue copyright infringement or lost profits based on X, Y, Z. And it's just going to continue on that cycle, which is going to embolden the ChatGPT, the OpenAIs of the world to continually abuse, just scraping anything they can get, because they can get anything, because technically, you're not recreating Mickey Mouse, you're, generating something inspired by Mickey Mouse, because that's what you fed in the machine. Okay.
That's Mickey Mouse. That's my...
Exactly.
Yeah, so the other point, though, is what you were implying, Elizabeth, is the Twitter thing. So the reason that Facebook Twitter bot went racist is because it was being fed horrible information. Mm-hmm. So do we really want these bots to be only fed shitty books, or books that, because I'm sure the alt-right will feed OpenAI as much as they possibly want.
Right. And I know that, sorry, I was about to go off on a rant about how the far right isn't a fan of anyone needing to give consent before they legislate people's lives away. But
exactly.
But if we were to proceed in an ethical way, if I made the laws, have a consent model, if they approached Sarah Silverman, would she have said, yeah, sure, use it? Maybe. The fact that the thought wasn't there to ask. There's a lot of ground level fundamental issues about the ethics in the whole process, start to finish. I recently heard an interview with a science researcher who's using AI in medicine, advancing global health equity, doing a lot of really cool things with computational medicine. And computational power, processing speed is it's way obviously way past the human brain. It's getting faster all the time. The possibilities
especially
are incredible.
For specific narrow tasks, yeah.
Yeah, but if it's not intentionally built in an ethical way, not only with the information that's being put into it, but about who gets access to the benefits of it and all of those things down the line, then yeah, it could be really catastrophic, because the potential for this technology is so huge. I don't know. I feel like we're at this point in history where we're experiencing an exponential leap that I'm not sure our human brains are quite ready for.
Yeah.
So
again, back to that John Oliver bit about, I don't think it was Tesla, but another AI driverless vehicle was more likely to hit a black person or a dark-skinned person than it was a white person because of the data that it was trained on. Is that really what we want? And I know Sarah Silverman's Bedwetter is not exactly the greatest novel of all time. I think personally I would rather have an AI trained on more Sarah Silverman's Bedwetter than Mein Kampf, you know, like.
Oh no, of course. I mean,
like,
and honestly, that example with the Tesla,
we're going to blame Tesla even if it wasn't them. That's
racist
perfect,
data, perpetuating racist results is not a shock.
Yes.
That trend, that history is very, very prevalent in like medical technology. There are pulse oximeters that they were calibrated for skin tones with less melanin, so they were not. There are studies coming out all the time about how they're not accurate in patients with darker skin tones, and it's led to deaths, and that's just one case. So the ethics along the whole thing is huge.
Even something less dire. I mean, this permeates everything. Something even as simple as like the evolution of camera technology and the way that.
Man, you're stealing my thing. I was going to use that.
Is it Kodak?
Kodak.
You go ahead.
Stock was
I'm going to butcher it.
No, you had it right. The Kodak, the white balance was trained on white models. So
and that is something that camera technology is still trying. Like the. I
mean, crayon used to have a flesh colored crayon. I mean, it's It's so like. It has permeated, like even digital camera technology like inherits the flaws of that, and it's something that like is a big deal. Like even it's like a big deal when you get a phone camera that's able to accurately capture like non-white skin tones. But again, if we limit the training data based on copyright, which I'm sorry, copyright in a lot of ways is fairly archaic how we treat it, especially in this country. And if we limit that training data on things that are signed for releases and copyrighted data, I mean, it kind of brings me back to like streaming services in a very lame comparison. But Black Sabbath, the Beatles, and AC/DC weren't on Spotify or Apple or anything for the longest time because they didn't have releases that were anywhere close to being allowed to be played on streaming services. Again, back to if you're limiting your training set, then you're going to introduce more bias than if you had more of a broader training set. And these lawsuits are doing nothing but limiting the training set.
I don't want to be too pessimistic, but I think a lot of this stuff, I mean, Elizabeth, you made a really good point about the fact that technology is, more than ever, like with this stuff specifically, it's far outpacing not just the laws of like our given jurisdictions, but we're getting so far out in front of what we're capable of doing. I think comparison to like nuclear weapons is probably premature, but I don't know.
I would say it's even worse than that because at least Oppenheimer and at least a lot of these scientists knew what the hell they were doing.
Well, I don't know.
You asked like an engineer. You asked an engineer about OpenAI, like how does ChatGPT work, and they don't even know.
One of my favorite Oppenheimer bits, though, is the fact that he was like, there's probably a 20% chance it'll cause a chain reaction, ignite the entire atmosphere, and kill all life on Earth.
Well,
send it.
100% confident.
Well, I mean. I know this is hack and cliche, but the Jeff Goldblum line from Jurassic Park has been flying through my head nonstop.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that they were so concerned with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should.
Yep.
Well,
nailed it.
On my face.
I guess I don't understand why I've never understood this, why what seems to be the predominant, at least in America, in my experience, the predominant thing seems to be that so many disciplines for a long time were very siloed, as if things don't affect each other, which is absurd. So it makes no sense to me to have a thought process where you're like, I'm going to create this thing with no thought about the impact, the ripple effects, all of it. And I think I was just recently listening to a series about Oppenheimer and the whole development of nuclear weapons, and they knew the science of how to create the weapon, but the implications of what that meant, or the potential of something like radiation sickness, or the horrific stuff that happened in Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Oppenheimer was a staunch socialist.
Yes. I think
it sounds more like he was a capitalist at heart. He did it for the money.
The notoriety was fine with him, I think, at some point after the fact, right? And then, he did get caught up pretty hard in the McCarthy era, but.
Yeah, humble people don't generally like try to compare themselves to the Hindu gods of destruction. in my experience.
Well, Elizabeth, exactly what you just said though earlier in the episode, though, it's like the poison of capitalism. That's why you have to shut everything off. Even like Charles Darwin, for instance, the only reason he published on The Origin of Species when it was published, because he notoriously worked on that for a decade or more, the reason he published it is because there was a threat. His publisher was saying, this other scientist is about to publish something. He's like, oh shit, I gotta get it out now. You know, it's like we're not a community lifting each other. There's no altruistic means of like, oh, let's all work together. It's like I got to get my shit because I got to get my bag. Because in Darwin's example, I owe my publisher the equivalent of $10 million of today's money because, you know, he invested in this research and I went to the Galapagos. And you know, I don't know if you guys know, but back in late 19th century, it wasn't exactly cheap to get to the Galapagos.
And they had birds there, didn't they? Yeah. Sarah Silverman's Bag Getter. That's the sequel that I...
But nonetheless, it was like, yeah, you have to be motivated by paying back your loans or getting whatever you need to get. And you got to shut off the world and do it. Yeah, so you don't die.
I think the other thing that's so frustrating, maybe one of the most fundamental things that's so frustrating about what we were talking about before, like, especially in America, you scratch the surface of literally anything and it is appalling racism underneath. So like, and that goes hand in hand with this capitalism and the patriarchy. Let me just get all up on my soapbox.
Yeah,
but
do it.
I guess the thing that's so frustrating is that it's not
we're
as
sorry.
if they're, what?
No.
Well, we're sorry.
Three
sorry.
white guys. We're sorry.
No. I appreciate the allyship. No, but
I never did anything wrong. I'm not apologizing.
Who are you, my uncle? It's not as if the perspectives and the thoughts weren't there to go different directions. It's not even a gendered thing. Like if we talk about like indigenous communities or like or people doing work, having entire ways of existing on the planet that were not the predominant way that things have gone, especially like in the Western world and all of these oppressive systems, especially when I think about climate change and all of the really dire stuff we're facing now. Like, obviously this is going to sound so stupid, but we've never been at this point in history before. And thinking about all of the potential, there were people, I'm sure, thinking of incredible things that just didn't surface to the top, or maybe they're still unknown. And it's frustrating that the predominant thing is so based in all of this shit that really shouldn't matter. If that makes any sense.
No, it doesn't. One of the things I think about a lot is that the best author, the best scientist, the best musician in the world, they would be able to create things that nobody could ever dream of that would be extremely beneficial or moving. They'll probably never get a chance to do any of that because they're stuck in a grind where, you know, they're probably, you know, bagging groceries. They're probably, which is not to diminish the value of or the any person who works a service job or anything, but it's just to say that the system that we live under, you know, nobody wants that to be their entire life, and the system that we're under is just whatever you're born into, whatever arbitrary, you know, whatever the preeminent culture has decided are the traits that allow you to be successful, that allow you to join the club, that give you higher status, that generally you're born into them. That's what determines who gets to succeed, who gets to put their stuff out there. One of my favorite games to play is you look at any relatively popular musician or whatever, even indie band people, and you just go to their Wikipedia and you see if their parents' names are highlighted and they link to their own Wikipedia articles. It's very, very common.
That is a game I play as well. Yeah.
Interesting.
There's actually a TikToker that focuses on musicians and that exact thing, especially. I love the surprise ones, like the Beastie Boys, for instance.
It's weird. It's like if you give people the space to like create. It's almost like it's not just like this intrinsic thing. It's almost like everybody has it, and it's only the people that are given the space to create something that actually create things.
Yeah, but the easy ones are like everyone accuses, I don't know, New Kids on the Block or Backstreet Boys or NSYNC or something like that. But it's always these like punk bands or, you know, indie or outsider, you know, music. And it ends up their mom is on the board of Capitol Records or something. You know, it's like, what the hell? Are you kidding me?
Drew, though, to your point, that's the whole... Can I swear on this podcast?
Oh,
fuck yeah.
Okay.
Day.
All right. That's the whole fucked up thing. I probably already swore and it just occurred to me to ask. So that's where, But about privilege and marginalization, and then often like compounding marginalization, right? It's harder and harder and harder the more compounding marginalizations a person has to break out of that. And again, so much of that is held up by capitalism. It would be amazing, for example, if we could get the money out of politics and have people legislating who were elected on merit and not the most fundraising. My parents will be like, why did they do that? As if they have some sort of like ethical compass. And I'm like, listen, ask yourself if this thing that seems incongruous to you helps them maintain their wealth, power, or privilege. And that's the answer. And it's gross, and it trickles down to the whole...
It's very similar to just like the whole voting on each law or proposed law, you know, by its own merit. But instead they have to like shoehorn all these other laws in to, again, maintain their wealth or power or privilege. It's the same thing.
I think that a lot of people kind of course, with like 2016 and everything, like the framing definitely changed in terms of like how people interact with politics, how people think about it. But I think one of the mistakes that people make is thinking that, it was at that point that everything like got bad, right? As opposed to that's just when the wheels kind of started to come off a little bit, when, people started to do away with like all of the posturing that was required before then to kind of like dress things up in a certain way. So you're now able to say the quiet parts out loud a lot more often. And of course, like we live in, depending on who you are, like we live in a very different country, person to person, but just speaking in generalities, like the overall sense of like trust that you have in like any random person, like it's going down, like we're becoming a lower and lower trust society, right? And so like people are starting to get a lot angrier. Things are becoming a lot more one-dimensional because there is a sense of like an increase. It's always been increasing, but we're reaching kind of like some boiling points. There's this constant increase in aggression, and this march towards kind of just like ripping all of the copper piping out of the system, and like all of these things, pleasantries and things, they start to go away. And so people, and I think that's one of the things that kind of like really bothered me after Biden got elected, was people being like, oh great, everything's back to normal now. No, like it's literally like, the 8 years before the big guy got in there, like it was Obama, right? It's like the system itself is obviously busted, right? These are just manifestations of a fundamentally broken system.
Well, it did go back to normal.
Well, for certain suburbanites that were able to stop paying.
No,
attention.
that's not what I mean. I mean, it went back to normal where everything was not thrown up on Twitter. It went back to being more secret of the things that they were trying to do.
I mean, if that's that as long as you
normal.
Acknowledge normal,
that's the
is
normal.
also
Like, that's the normal.
horrifying.
Like, I mean, honestly,
Status quo.
I was obviously no fan of Trump, but it was kind of nice that he just threw all of this shit out there.
It's the ratcheting strap analogy.
I know it was all bullshit and kind of
but part of one of the
but...
like the quote unquote like positives of it was certainly like people got more involved in politics, right? Like people, in opposition of that.
And he lifted
like
the veil, honestly.
See, I don't know.
He was a sleeper agent. He's a double agent. He's actually,
I think Bernie
a socialist.
was the reason, as far as like on the left, anything on the left, I think Bernie excited people. Trump, people who got involved in politics because of Trump are not involved in politics. They're just not. They don't watch the news. They're involved in Trump, the celebrity.
It's a rabid cult that worships violence. Let's be honest.
It's like a death cult for sure.
Yeah,
like it's 100%.
I wouldn't call them involved in politics, though.
No, but very involved in facts aren't real, and dismantling all sorts of stuff. I mean, it's true though. Like, if people just started paying attention in 2016, like, that's the wrong thing. Things have been messed up for a lot of people for a long time.
But at the same time, like, I do think Trump, exciting the proletariat. I mean, I think everybody on the left should be taking notes. But at the same time, I always go back, I think it was an NPR interviewer, and he did like a man on the street kind of thing. It was during the 2016 election and or primaries, and he interviewed a bunch of people exiting a union organization, like a union meeting. I don't even know what union it was. I don't know if it was Steelworkers or UAW or whatever. And he interviewed everyone coming out, and every single one of those guys came out and said, I'm either going to vote for Bernie or Trump, because they're the only two candidates that are talking about trade. Those two candidates were exciting the proletariat, like the actual working class.
Because they offered something different in one direction or the other.
Because they're like, you guys got a raw deal with NAFTA. You guys got a raw deal. Yeah.
Did Donald Trump do anything about that? Absolutely not.
Of course not.
Would he ever do anything with it? No, because
no.
But that is, and like people talk about like it a lot. I think it absolutely is worthy of like the dictionary definition, like fascist label, right? Like you kind of appeal to those more like.
Yeah, fascists did the same thing. They
right, where it's like you're like, no,
like
these people are screwing you, and it's like you're right, they are screwing you. What are we gonna do about it? And then like the Bernie Sanders, like, we're gonna give people free health, we're gonna make sure that healthcare is like a human right, and we're gonna like make sure that like
We're
I
gonna
have
build a wall.
the Bernie t-shirt that I have, which is like, this is like, and this is the thing that really like sold me on Bernie is this idea of like, are you willing to make a sacrifice for somebody you don't know, just by virtue of them being like a human being that's like worthy of dignity and respect. And then the Donald Trump thing is like, what are we going to do about these people screwing you? We're probably going to give them a tax cut, but maybe we can just like be more mad about just like any given brown person.
The crucial difference there, I mean, among many, is the existence or lack there of empathy, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you're Donald Trump and you're someone who is entirely lizard brain, I mean, he's very shrewd in some ways, but he is, I don't think, a smart man at all.
He has
No,
his instincts about like what the crowd wants are pretty solid.
Oh yeah,
but that's about
he's appealing to people who want to say those same things. And that's, I think, one of the most disheartening things. I mean, we had a clearly like super dangerous and incompetent monster who was just, you know, at every turn an embarrassment, endangering people, whatever. The people clapping and screaming and cheering in the crowds are the most disturbing part, because if he was just a person on a street corner saying that to 6 people and no one ever stood up and gave him any sort of legitimacy, it's not that our system wouldn't still be in need of a lot of work. I mean, like, I don't know, honestly, like, for a long time now, it's just been progressive candidates only for me, you know, because they're the only people in there who are actually, like, again, functioning with empathy at the core of why you're in public service, not using it as a money
some sort
grab.
of a vision, some sort of a vision that goes beyond, we're just going to keep funneling money and power upwards.
Yeah.
Some sort of a prescription for what are we going to do?
And of course, the structure we have now is absolutely fine with socialism for the most wealthy.
No, they have it. Yeah, we live in a socialist country. If you make over, you know, $300,000 a year,
or if you're in the army, you know, which they conveniently forget that's like.
I have friends, socialists who join the army. They're very poor. For a lot of people, that's like the only path that a lot of people can really see. They have healthcare. Yeah, they've got.
My father-in-law. That's why he joined. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the funniest thing to me in the world, where it's like, wow, you want people to like, the funniest thing to me, and I'm a little bit of a tangent, but it's the funniest argument is like, oh, you want socialist healthcare, so you want to like force doctors into slave labor? Are you high?
Yeah, this is
like, what do you think the fire department is? What do you think the police department is? What do you think the
military? That I got with
insane.
Listen, Drew, I
folks.
do think you should get your government hands off my Medicare.
Absolutely. I love the Medicare Incorporated.
Stop socialism. Keep my Social Security.
But this just goes to show you that like our education system sucking a total ass is a feature, not a bug.
Well.
My mom taught public school, elementary, for 30 years, and I felt very strongly about public education. And for a really long time, there's been this intentional dismantling of the public education system. Even the public education system that we had when it was more supported was still teaching a very curated, very wrong in a lot of ways version of history of this country. Like, the amount of stuff we're all having to unlearn as adults is a crime. You know what I mean? And it perpetuates things into further generations, right?
Like 7 cool white guys.
Oddly no.
Christopher Columbus was a champion of human rights.
A powerful, beautiful man.
Yeah, it's I think it's 2 things with the education, because you're right, and it's twofold. Like, one is, how can we make more money off of teaching, and 2 is, how can we have the most ignorant populace possible? Because when you have an entire country who lacks, I'm not saying the entire country does, obviously, but we have more and more people who lack critical thinking. Yeah, okay, thank you. But when you have more and more people who are like, not only do they lack critical thinking skills, but malign critical thinking.
It's not interesting.
Yeah,
that's none of my business.
The anti,
like, and it's not even. I think sometimes people don't engage with certain things because they're like, well, I don't. There's no reason to like gatekeep these types of arguments, right? Like, because I know people are like, I don't want to talk about politics because I don't feel like educated enough in it. It's not even that. It's about just these very fundamental, like you were saying earlier, Drew. Do you actually care about other people? Do you see other people as people? Period.
Right.
Do you or do you not?
That's right. When people talk about like half the time when people say politics, it's not that you don't want to talk about politics. Like your perception of politics is just what's on MSNBC. Like that's not like politics is just who has power basically, and everybody should be involved in that because you're people, and the people you care about are people. And if you don't care about it, other people that might not have the best interest of you or the people you care about, or if you are like a person with like a heart, just like general humanity, they will suffer for it. And sorry, like you're born, you're a person, you're around, so you can get in the game or you can just like forfeit.
I mean, it affects you whether you want it to or not, but your level of privilege gives, I mean, there, a lot of...
It insulates you, certainly.
Just the ability to look away, it's awful. And I think a lot of, but anyway, I could go on about
so much of our society is like designed around helping people look away or feeling like they can post something on social media and they've done their time.
Those are the same people that will complain about the price of food at the grocery store or whatever, gas price, whatever it is, like whatever affects them, and not associate that with the people in power and what have you.
It's also wild too to think, at what point does whatever Fox News talking point matter more to you than the fact that we have all these mass shootings and nothing's done about it? You know what I mean? At what point, that's just one tiny example. It's not a tiny example. It's a huge fucking problem, but I just don't understand how people can look away from the fact that very clear Christo-fascism, super on the rise, and they can be like, oh no, but I'm still voting for them because whatever manufactured reason, it doesn't make any sense. Well, it's indefensible.
I just believe that there is like these extremely weird, latent kind of vibes that people. I mean, I think obviously there's not just one reason, but a big one for like more secular, quote unquote, like conservative, like right wing people, despite the fact that they're not really thinking it through. They're certainly being like influenced by the evangelical kind of stuff for whatever reason, even if it can be packaged in kind of a more secular way. Is I will be a billionaire one day. Like one day, yes, I'm getting stepped on right now. One day it will be me who's doing the stepping, and it's like that is just such a...
There's a Steinbeck line, I'm going to get this wrong, but it's basically if you ask any American that they're just temporarily embarrassed millionaires.
Yeah.
That's the
They're millionaires in waiting, basically.
Going back to what you were saying, Drew, about like people being into politics. Whenever I hear somebody say that they're not into politics, it always reminds me of this one quote. I don't know who said it. I mean, I pulled it up again just to try and find who originally said it, but it's posted by the DSA LA, and it's like, you're just not that into politics. It's like, well, your boss is, your landlord is, and your
it might surprise you to know that
and everything, and everything everything that you're complaining about, right, or upset about, or being, squashed by, those people are into politics.
This is something, but this is something
exactly what you said is they are not in there to have your best interests in mind.
People,
so you really gotta
people know that, I think, instinctually on some level. People, I think, instinctually know that there are forces that are like responsible for the situations that they're in, even if they won't name them. But I think a lot of the ignorance is actually willful. And I thinking about the QAnon type things, which is basically like an ARG where everyone is just kind of like LARPing. It's hard to take them seriously until one of them like kills somebody, because it's so absurd, right? And you see like these conspiracy theories about, like the Nazis, they have a secret moon base or whatever. And then you couple that with we're like extremely like weirdly animated readings of the Book of Revelation or something. And like all of these things connect together in these like really weird ways. And half of it I feel like is easy for people to like get involved in because the problems that we face are massive, but you could theoretically do something about them through organizing. Like there is work that you could put in that could make those things better. But the challenge of that, I think, is too much.
Nobody wants to work anymore, Drew.
Yeah, no. We got to get people back into the socialist offices. So the people will like invent these extremely, absolutely like these like spiritual tapestries of like to like understand reality, that where everything can be true at once, and there's like demons fighting angels. That way they can't do anything about it, but they can like still talk about it, and they can still be really upset about it, and they can still kind of like feel, but there's no work for that to be done.
It's all existential. It's too big.
It's also a very convenient self-righteous fuel. Like,
Yeah.
I am right. This is ordained by a greater power. There's that.
God says
and then
I'm right.
I'm basically an atheist, but my mom isn't. And from what I understand, Jesus was a kind socialist person as a historical
1,000%,
figure, right?
1,000%.
So and also not white. Yeah. So
That's a big one. A lot of people have trouble with that one.
the far right Christian nationalist movement right now co-opts all of that. Tolerance, loving your neighbor, all of those tenets go right out the window, and it's used as a cudgel instead. And I think you're saying something that reminded me of, there was a documentary about flat earthers, I think, not hollow earthers, but flat earthers. And there was a
They do
scientist.
not like each other.
I can imagine the conventions are pretty rough. There was a scientist who was essentially had a very like kind view and was just like, essentially they're just like, imagine if they applied all of this energy, all of this research that they're doing, all of this, because they're trying to do like critical thought and finding
They're like
things,
walking backwards into the scientific
but
method.
just went in this direction that's like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, you know, so, but if it could be applied for good, you know, I mean, but yeah, so obviously there's QAnon's total horseshit, but
Well, no, because like, and that's what makes me so sad about everything is it's like if you just zoom out for a second, like even just like looking beyond like the current moment or whatever, just like there's 7 billion people on the planet, and the way that I view human beings is that we're all pretty capable. Like I think that the ceiling and the floor of like human potential is extremely close together. More than anything else, it's about the environment and the opportunity, like like the space that you have to do things, how much information you have access to, and how much you're given the space to essentially act on those things, and like how much potential that is. But because of the fact that there's like, I don't know, maybe a couple hundred people that need bigger and bigger yachts every year. Like, no, we can't have any of that. No, we need to optimize so that this shirt costs $17. And unfortunately, yes, that does mean an Indonesian child will only live to see 29 years old.
well, and setting up all these systems to keep people pitted against each other when in reality, I mean, I guess I'm not talking about like the irretrievable horrific bigots, but in general, like people of a similar economic class will have more in common with each other, right, than billionaires, just by circumstance. You're right, the potential that's wasted is
you
really
don't even have to set up
heartbreaking.
the system though. All you have to do is just restrict the resources and let it
It'll
go.
work itself out.
Yeah. If you set a bunch of rats in a cage, doesn't matter what color the rats are, but you only give them one piece of cheese and there's 10 rats, there's something fun's going to happen.
I will say, though, that one rat would say, why don't we share the cheese?
Divide the cheese?
So, I'm just saying.
Some rats might decide that,
Well,
and
the
other
cheese,
rats are
the
going to
cheese
just
is
fuck over
actually
the other
the
rats.
cheese is actually too small to share.
I would say.
So what's really going to happen is some of them are going to share the other rats.
I would if I was a rat, and maybe this is tipping my hand too much, I would say, hey, other rats, you see that guy in the white lab coat? We should fucking kill that guy because he has all the cheese and he's like withholding it for no goddamn reason.
And then you would be a conspiracy theorist, and everybody would be like,
right? No, so
I don't even know what white lab coat. I don't even know what you're talking about. What is a lab coat? I don't even know.
No, that's
the class
God.
thing
Actually,
is so either like
that he's talking about.
The class
You
thing
can't
is so
kill God.
fascinating because you're right. Like everybody, and like that's like the history of the world is the history of class warfare, 1,000%. Throughout history, like there's always ways that people have been able to keep people from developing that sort of consciousness that, oh, wait a minute, we make up the vast majority of like, not to be too much of a class reductionist, but like we're doing this on the behalf of these people essentially. And so if we organize, if we pool our talents, like we don't really need, and we don't have to kill them. Like it doesn't have to be violent, but it's like it often is. It often is because they will try to defend the status quo violently. Or
their life in this instance, because they're just working in a lab.
Okay. Well, I don't want to extend the metaphor too far, but it's like right now, what it really feels like is the way that like you're prevented from developing class consciousness is to atomize people, like, and that's really easy to do with the internet. And I'm not saying it's like an explicit top-down cabal type thing. I think all of this stuff happens kind of organically, and the upper class, their interests are able to align because they don't have to fight all day. And so like, you have two like real methods beyond just the general atomization where people can't really talk to each other at all, which is that like you have the carrot of, don't you want to be a millionaire? Don't you want to be, get that promotion? Don't you want to go to the next thing? And the stick of like, do you want to be the person that's delivering the food to you today? And then for the DoorDash drivers, for the Uber drivers, it's, do you want to be homeless? And so you give people something to lose, because like right now, income inequality is much higher than it was even right before the French Revolution, but we're not nearly to that point of like boiling over to like that sort of like some sort of massive like revolution, because people have something to lose. And I don't know what the answer to that is.
Yeah.
To bring this back to AI, actually, I was thinking, I think a lot about this. Like, the human brain hasn't really changed fundamentally in a very long time, right? Like, we're operating with the same brain that people who went through the bubonic plague had. But there were always, you have to imagine that just like there are people who are like discussing all the possibilities, there were people back then too. And I feel like we're at this point again with a huge advance. And we're talking about all these problems, all of these systemic things that, yes, can be helped and fixed if there was like a will and people organizing to do it, which there are. But the things we're battling against are so entrenched and so powerful. We're at this precipice of a new thing that in the future will be everywhere, dictating everything, proceeding ethically and responsibly now in every facet. I just feel like there's not... I don't know. I mean, the
motivations are still capitalist.
It's gonna get a lot worse.
That's
actually, it's any better.
Which is the terrifying part.
That's actually what makes me kind of upset about the whole AI thing in general, is that even in its early stages, you could see really like massive benefits for it to do good, but all it's being used for is capitalist nonsense.
Yeah, let's replace the copywriters,
replace the jobs, replace
creatives.
Like, you know, there's that one article one of you sent about, you know, the CEO replacing 90% of his support staff. You know, it's just like
call centers.
Instead of like doing good things with it, it's all about just making more profit. That's all it is, and it just.
I will offer a tiny ray of sunshine, though, because I was feeling similarly bad and wondering how long it was going to take to end up in Battlestar Galactica when they gain sentience and just like try to destroy us. At least in medicine, there are some people working in a very ethical way to do some very cool things, developments that are happening super fast, being able to map the genetics of a cancerous brain tumor in like 90 seconds. Like there was some story recently about a woman who AI helped model a prediction that she would be diagnosed with breast cancer in 4 years. Finding out that
she could
early.
afford to get the surgery.
I'm saying, listen, it's all intertwined, right? And the rivulets,
I got
the
a
branches.
GoFundMe that she might be able to.
Oh God,
I
don't
have
even
to
get me
ask-
started on how.
I
Yeah.
have to ask though, was she doing that like on her own?
I don't know all of the context. I heard about that secondhand from a friend who read the article, but yeah.
If she wasn't, then it's obviously being, you know, funded by something or someone who is eventually going to want to turn a profit on that. So it's, you know, I'm not saying that it's not helping for good, but it's still going to end up being like, okay, they found out like the breast cancer thing. It's like they'll start marketing that to find out if you're going to have breast cancer in 10 years for 10 grand.
Your insurance won't cover this test.
Yeah,
but...
exactly. It's gonna come back. Like that's the thing that sucks.
I didn't say that because I thought it might be too gloomy. But in terms of like all these lawsuits and stuff, the advancements with large language models and transformer models more broadly in the open source space. Okay, yes, you can sue OpenAI, you can sue, I don't know, Cohere, you can sue any of these other like large language model companies. But the tech is moving so fast and it's getting into the hands of so many people that anybody will be able to build it. It's the same type of fear that like we haven't even had time like on the deepfake stuff to like even see where that shit's gonna go. Yeah. Like people, you can just do whatever the fuck you want. This is 10 years from now, you will be able to do the type of shit that OpenAI is doing with their $50 million data centers on your phone.
This is like, back to the whole like if you're scraping a bunch of free books illegally, it's like who cares? Because someone else is just going to do it.
And I know that's kind of defeatist, right? It's kind of defeatist, but it's like it is a little bit defeatist, but it's like for me it's just hard, and I don't want to be like, you know, whatever. But it's like I'm like that's a lost cause to me at this point.
Exactly.
I'm sorry. Like I'm not saying like yes. If people like, I'm not saying don't like pursue damages. Like sure, fine, do it. Yes, and I will support it and I'll do whatever. The reality of the situation is that we did just hit a quantum leap in like the computational power, or at least in terms of our ability to use it effectively. The computational power we already have. We've already had a massive gold rush on this stuff, and it's going to keep going, and it's going to keep getting bigger and bigger. Nvidia, like Nvidia's stock just like quadrupled, and it's like all of like the capital that we have that was pooled in crypto bullshit, that's all going to pool around something that can actually make things worse or better. I mean, it'll be worse, but, or, you know, theoretically better in a better world. And so it's going to, like, I'm not even making, it's insane. It's going to get crazy. The one thing that I will say that is somewhat optimistic in terms of like an actual game it out of where it gets worse and then it potentially gets better is, okay, so yeah, replace all the jobs with AI. Who's going to buy your shit? Because nobody has any money anymore.
Yeah.
Because there's no jobs.
Yeah.
So that's one of those examples of like it just eating itself.
You can't have a universal basic income though, Drew. You can't have it.
You can't have it. You can't have it.
No.
You can't have it. Because I'm obviously UBI is better than this bullshit that we have now. I'm all for it. I do think sometimes the pessimistic side of me is like, oh, that's just kind of like a band-aid, and then they'll just continue to kind of do whatever they want, and it'll get worse or whatever. But
it could get it could go back to feudalism, though. I mean, it could go backward.
That's fine. Honestly, I'll
it's
work.
Always
yeah,
a potential.
that's fine.
Like no one needs to buy anything because they all work for my town, my company town, and they pay in monopoly dollars to continue, I don't know, shoveling dirt.
That's kind of what we already have, Randy.
I was just going to say, Randy,
it could get even worse.
The gig is that was already.
Yeah, that's true. All right.
It can get worse as long as it gets sillier.
Okay.
In equal measure.
Right. Yeah. Well, Mr. Beast, he started as a little company town, so
I'm joining up.
I mean, I feel like I'm naturally, Randy, this will shock you. I'm naturally a glass half empty type of gal. But I have to maintain some ray of hope that even though, honestly, do I think that this is going to be very gloomy? Do I think that the good and the empathetic and the altruistic is going to ultimately win out at the end of the day over all of the other forces that are there? I feel like it would be naive to think that, but I have to have hope that it will exist and persist in some ways as it has throughout history. And I hope that that is a force that can grow. And again, it comes back to access and capitalism as well, because which is why I was encouraged to hear that there are some scientists, researchers who are working on trying to not only advance global health equity, but democratize the tech so that you get more people who may not have access to a lab, but can come up with amazing things because they're able to access it more easily. But I do think you're right. Like the cat's out of the bag, and unfortunately, humanity has a lot of wonderful things and a lot of truly gruesome things. And unfortunately, I think we're going to see both.
All right, episode 40.
Really get
in the bag.
Yeah, it was really good.
Thank you for having me on the show. This was really nice.
Yeah, we'd love to have you back.
I didn't know what I could offer, but that was a fun conversation.
We always open up to our guests if you have any shout outs, any URLs, anything that you want.
I don't have anything to plug for me, but at the moment, maybe if you have me on again, I will have something in the future. But I will say, support your local drag performers and don't let anybody dull your shine. Seriously, I know that sounds stupid, but we are in this fucking oppressive 2D ass world, and we are 3D people. I haven't even had anything to drink. There, I said it. Okay.
That's perfect. So yeah, episode 40, Watch Us Drive, we have a voicemail at wedocrime.com/voicemail. Leave us a voicemail and we will cover it. And we have a YouTube channel, youtube.com/@wedocrime. We love you.
Now watch this drive.
So we have to protect our juniors.
We're not selling anybody's data. Now watch this drive.